Hi parents, I would like to talk tonight about bullying. And over the years at Small World, and also in my experience of working with teenagers across all cultures, ages, I've sort of developed this theory about bullying and victiming that I wonder if it would be helpful to share. So, all children are born strong and capable and good, actually, and this is a choice that we make, a lens that we choose consciously to gaze upon our children. And sometimes this lens gets challenged because there is a child who is mistreating our child, or vice versa, our child is mistreating another's. And then we are called upon to react or to respond, and to do so in the wisest possible way, so that the dynamics of this behavior, this entanglement, can be untied. So, what is the best response for a parent or a caregiver who wishes to not so much cut through that Gordian knot, but to untie it or untangle it? So there's this theory that we have. It's the theory called the tunnel, and I think it's best described as follows. So when children come into the world, they are socialized, begin to be socialized. There's a lot of parallel play. So early years, 1-2-year-olds might stand alongside each other, say around a sand table or whatever, and this child will be playing here and this child will be playing with a toy there, and all the while they're looking up to see, to observe, to gather information about how to solve certain problems, but they don't yet cross over that barrier of parallel play, each in their little silo, until they become ready. And the way that you know that they become ready is they reach out and snatch, say, that one toy that the friend next to them has been playing with, as an experiment, as a test, a trial, one could say an error. And our immediate response to that would need to be chosen wisely. If there is punishment and punitive consequences for such a behavior, for example, go to your room, or for example, God forbid, corporal punishment, or shouting even, the child is not able to learn from that behavior. And they then go into fight or flight, and aren't able to process the consequences of those behavior. So it's best in those early days to teach, to take an approach of, you could say, discipline, which the root word of that is teach, to teach, disciple, to teach. And to show, to model. So at Small World, what we might do is show the children this is caring hands or sharing hands. So instead of T-Rex hands, or snatchy dinosaur limbic system, I'll take it, and very sort of reactionary kind of way, but to model a more frontal lobe response. So putting out the sharing hands, and all the children, they see this as a kind of a cue. A cultural cue to say, please, can I have it when you're done? Even for the very little who can't say those full sentences, they put their hand out. So it's to teach these skills. So then the child learns these skills. They're role modeled in classes. We even practice them. They turn 2, and now they begin to swap over from parallel play into cooperative play, but they don't yet know how to cooperate so well, and are learning the kind of terms of engagement and what makes relationships work. And so we must allow children this kind of laboratory style space in which to make errors and to receive natural consequences or feedback, with healthy boundaries, boundaries that are held firm by the adults in the space. So now, what do we do when the child who has been through this process of learning, of teaching, of understanding, I've got sharing hands, not snatching hands, I learned to say the words, there's also this cultural cue at Small World to put up our traffic cop hands. Those of you who know about it, stop, I don't like it. And that's a way for a child to be able to assert a boundary no matter what, if there is an adult there or not, to be able to feel safe within that a boundary. So what happens when all of that knowledge, shall we say information, is gained, it's been taught, it's been emphasized, it's been role modeled, it's been showed, it's been practiced, and the child still does not use those skills, those techniques, then we can see that there is something else to be learned here. So sometimes what happens is a child who solves problems, conflict, more aggressively or more passively, are trying to learn how to be here in this part of the spectrum, which is solving problems assertively. And to do that, they kind of often flip-flop up and down that spectrum to be able to land eventually in this general area. And to be honest, so many adults are still passive, aggressive, and still working their way to this. So what can we do to support this learning? Well, very often children will hook in their greatest shadow. So a child who is more passive in solving, handing things over, not asserting themselves. Yes, if a child just takes a bike from them or whatever, they might shrink and or just hand it over without being able to, or without wanting to assert that boundary. This sort of stop, that kind of passive way, rather than stop, the voice that comes from the belly, the eye contact, and that hand that just asserts a personal space. And we also teach the children to be on the front foot. So that's a very good nonverbal cue of, I mean business. Anyway, so what happens? So what I was saying is that we find that children very often will hook in their greatest teacher. There's that saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. We find that children often will find that very person who's solving problems on the other side of the spectrum to play with and to choose to play with. So they might jump on a trampoline together, or they might go bike riding together, or whatever it is, over and over. They self-choose each other's company as they learn these skills. Somewhere in that experimentation there's going to be a problem that is not insurmountable, but a dynamic that gets created as these two, passive, aggressive, hook each other in and begin almost a journey through what we might call the tunnel. And you can find that children go through these periods, sometimes weeks, sometimes months even, where there is this dynamic that is developed between this child and that. What is our job? What is our response as the adults in the space, hopefully processed enough to be able to respond in a way that will allow the children to move through this dark period, you could say, this tunnel, this time of learning, uncertainty. Sometimes we even hear children don't want to come to school, or are nervous at their homes. They share with their parents their worries. They talk about their shadow, that so-called bully, in fearful tones, and parents get very concerned, and understandably they want to react and they want to keep their child safe. what is the best way to respond as a parent when you are sensing perhaps that your child doesn't have the skills to assert their own boundaries. So we find sometimes that it's very difficult for parents to respond instead of react, and unfortunately there can be finger pointing. He's a bully, she's a victim, he, and this kind of labeling is absolutely so detrimental to this process of learning, this tunneling, if we want to call it that, because it labels the child and puts them in a box from which it's almost impossible to climb or to grow out. And when that's all the child wants to do anyway, that's why they're hooking in this friend, to be able to learn these social skills. So what do we do then? We would like parents, instead of reacting, to respond. And what is the job of such adults? Well, it's actually to hold that tunnel wall so firm in boundary, in a kind of a processed image of child, that it will not collapse in on the child and forever trap them in that dark place of I'm always a bully or I'm always a victim. But that the parents, the adults, the teachers can hold open that tunnel and shorten the distance considerably, so that yes, the light at the end of the tunnel is visible for the child, and they will work swiftly to be able to integrate the knowledge, the information that they've received about boundary holding and boundary pushing, that will teach them these assertiveness skills, that forever the information becomes knowledge. So I think it's a very important way of seeing this dynamic of bullying, and we see that children move through quite swiftly if the adults are able to actually adult and step in as that boundary holder, rather than hooking each other in as adults, say as parents of the children who are involved in this laboratory of relationships, hooking, and then themselves as parents also going through the tunnel as if they were children. So there's an amazing Dr. Shefali. She's written a book called The Awakened Parent, or Awakened Families, and she talks about this very much, as children serve as mirrors for their parents' forgotten self. And our role as parents and adults is to preserve our child's true self and their wholeness. And we do that by healing our own brokenness. If we as adults, as children, were bullied as children, or resolve things in passive or aggressive ways, even still to this day, it can be very difficult to hold this space in an adult way, and one can get hooked in and react in ways that do not serve the children. And also teach the children, not only your own but those in the community, that yes, the children themselves cannot solve the problem themselves, but that the adults are entangled in this. And I think to defeat bullying in all our schools across the world, such an epidemic it is, we as parents mustn't rush to punish and issue out punitive consequences and ban children from each other, and send children away from our schools. We must act for sure, but it's not to not destroy that underlying dynamic of bully victim that is in fact the very becoming of each of the children that are involved in that. It's that laboratory that is teaching your children what they most need to know. And so don't destroy it by you play over here, but actually create the boundaried space in which that dynamic itself can transform, and this child can walk the hero's journey like Jung says, and yes, integrate their own shadow and come to wholeness in the way that they see themselves and are seen by their community. So I hope that helps us in the way that we educate and teach our own child, our own children, but also that we hold space for not only our own child in our homes, our schools, but also those of the community. And it does take a village to raise a child, and I encourage us to hold off on those labels that would fixate the child in a specific phase of their development, and not see the child as naturally wanting to be in good relationships, in positive relationships, and to learn those skills, sometimes the hard way, but to actively work towards learning those skills, sometimes through trial and error, so that they too can be the best that they can be. So I wish you also all the love in the world for your own journey, as we also learn to reparent ourselves so that we might be the best parents for our children.